Quote, I remember when I met with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. Did you meet Kim Jong-un?
Well, as soon as this was brought to my attention, I certainly made some changes. And
as soon as it was brought to my attention, bitch, it's your book! Now we have to talk about something strange, because I find myself, for the first time in a while, saying that I 100% agree with a Democratic politician. That is not something that happens very often. Once in a while it does occur. But that's because the Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman, who seems to have become somewhat moderate, his ideological evolution is a little bit hard to parse and follow. He just put out a tweet making a direct appeal to President Trump to fire DHS Secretary Kristi Noem. Let's read his tweet. At President Trump, I make a direct appeal to immediately fire at Secretary Noem. Americans have died. She is betraying DHS's core mission and trashing your border security legacy. Do not make the mistake President Biden made for not firing a grossly incompetent DHS secretary. I thought this was an interesting point because he's acknowledging that Biden really mismanaged the border and that Mayorkas, his DHS secretary, did a terrible job, and then using that to appeal to Trump and say, you got to get rid of Kristi Noem. And I've talked about this, but I really do agree with this because she has now twice come out and blatantly lied about a dead American who'd just been killed in whatever you think, justified shooting, Renee Good, Alex Pretty, or not, lied about them, accused them of all sorts of criminal activity they never actually did, and then not corrected or apologized and just made the situation worse. And she is just so unhinged and so untrustworthy, Kristi Noem is, that I'd forgotten about this. But I want to play you this clip. And this is the context. She had written a book. And of course, when politicians write books, they are ghostwritten. They don't actually write their own books. However, when you're supposed to read it, maybe she doesn't. Maybe she can't read. I don't know. But maybe she didn't read her own book before putting her name on it and releasing it. But the ghostwriter put a whole story in her book about how she met Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea, and stared him down. And people fact checked this and were like, wait, there's no record of her ever meeting Kim Jong-un. That did not happen. And so she quietly removed it from her book, but then never really acknowledged it. I want to play you this insane clip. And it's a little old. It's from a couple of years ago, but it's her being pressed by a TV host about this. Watch this.
Talk about meeting some world leaders and one specific one. Quote, I remember when I met with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. I'm sure he underestimated me, having no clue about my experience staring down little tyrants. I've been a children's pastor after all. Did you meet Kim Jong-un?
Well, as soon as this was brought to my attention, I certainly made some changes and looked at this passage. And I've met with many, many world leaders. I've traveled around the world. As soon as it was brought to my attention, we went forward and have made some edits. So I'm glad that this book is being released in a couple of days and that those edits will be in place and that people will have the updated version.
I'm sorry. I just have to talk about this for a second. As soon as it was brought to my attention, bitch, it's your book! As soon as it was brought into my attention, what I wrote in my book, you mean, shouldn't it have already been on your attention? That's the thing. I think that's a lie. I think it's a cop-out. I think she actually knew and just didn't think she'd get caught. She probably even told the ghostwriter, because what they do is they sit with the ghostwriter and they talk about, oh, I want to talk about this, tell this story, tell this story. She probably even, it's not like the ghostwriter just made stuff up. That seems very unlikely. So now she's, without even really acknowledging the truth, she can't even come out and say, no, I did not meet with him. That was a mistake that was in the ghostwriting process. I apologize, and we removed it from the book. That would be it. Okay, that's embarrassing. That's just kind of pathetic, but whatever, I guess. To just stone-faced look into the camera and say that it was brought to your attention, what was in your own book, and then say, not answer the actual question. She asked her again. Listen to the rest of this.
So you did not meet with Kim Jong-un. That's what you're saying.
I've met with many, many world leaders, many world leaders. I've traveled around the world. I think I've talked extensively in this book about my time serving in Congress, my time as governor, before governor, some of the travels that I've had. I'm not going to talk about my specific meetings with world leaders. I'm just not going to do that.
Except in your book.
This anecdote shouldn't have been in the book, and as soon as it was brought to my attention, I made sure that that was adjusted. So
I literally feel like I'm being gaslit. And my intelligence is being insulted listening to this woman who wasn't at the time, but she was a former governor and congresswoman, but is now the head of the Department of Homeland Security, tell us that she removed the anecdote about meeting Kim Jong-un from her book. Why would you remove it if you actually met him? Did you meet him or not? Like, what in the holy hell is happening here? By removing it, you're admitting you didn't actually meet him, or you wouldn't remove it from the book, but then you still won't say that you didn't meet him. This whole thing, I mean, obviously it's an old clip. It's not super relevant to what's happening now, but it's just part and parcel of this long trend. This woman is not credible. She is not serious. She's not honest. She is not a trustworthy source of information. And we need the head of the Department of Homeland Security to be a serious person. Of course, it should be a person who supports Trump's agenda. Of course, it should be a person who wants mass deportation. But it shouldn't be a clown who lies and gaslights blatantly to the American people. Hot take, I know. I don't care whether it's a Democrat senator saying it or whether it's the many people in conservative media saying it. I wholeheartedly agree. I want to show you guys this as well. This is an article, Mediaite's got the headline here, but they're reporting on a bombshell article, scathing article really, from the conservative outlet National Review. Fire Kristi Noem into the sun. That's a quote. National Review publishes nuclear takedown of DHS secretary. On Monday, the National Review published an op-ed entitled Fire Kristi Noem into the Sun by Jeffrey Blahar, who slammed Noem's knee-jerk demonization of Preddy. Blahar said that President Donald Trump should change gears on immigration by firing Kristi Noem, preferably out of a rocket and into the sun. Metaphorically, of course. He continued, any hope of Trump's presidency clawing its way out of the hole it has dug for itself begins with firing Kristi Noem, current Secretary of Homeland Security, in the administration's most prominent ride-along disaster during its first year, preferably out of a rocket and into the sun. Damage control is needed, and she's the most visible avatar of damage. Honestly, I'd advise Trump to can nearly everybody within the remote orbit of DHS leadership except for Tom Homan. That is, if I thought he was reading me. But I will settle instead for the hope that this one message will break through. Staunch the bleeding by canning your most incompetent lieutenant. Out came Noem this weekend, in the wake of the shooting, to announce via previously undisclosed powers of clairvoyance, this is an individual who came with weapons and ammunition to stop a law enforcement operation of federal law enforcement officers committed an act of domestic terrorism. That's the facts. That's the quote from Kristi Noem. Oh, are they? This is Jeffrey again. Alex Preddy committed domestic terrorism by being there. This looks like a situation where an individual arrived to inflict maximum damage and kill law enforcement, Noem said. Jeffrey writes, I am envious of her mind-reading ability. For my own part, I saw a guy executed while face down on the street. So listen, it is significant that a publication like National Review, where the editorial stance is supportive, generally speaking, of Trump's immigration policies, still agrees that Kristi Noem is incompetent and has to go. And I think even from the perspective, if you're somebody who supports Trump, you should want him to have more capable and trustworthy deputies than her. Now, speaking of politicians that are neither capable nor trustworthy, we should also just spare a word for the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, of course a Democrat, who ran as the vice presidential candidate for Kamala Harris, because he's getting scolded for his rhetoric by the Holocaust Museum on their official Twitter account. Yeah, imagine my surprise if you're like, imagine one day you just open up the news and like the Holocaust Museum has denounced you. That's like kind of wild. But he's getting this, of course, because of his frivolous and overwrought comparisons of ICE raids, which I have a lot of concerns about what's happening, but he, of course, had to compare it to frickin' Anne Frank and the Nazis, because of course they did. And he's now being blasted for it by the Holocaust Museum. So here's the Mediaite headline: deeply offensive. Holocaust Museum rebukes Tim Walz over Anne Frank comparison. The U.S. Holocaust Museum on Monday called out American politicians for comparing ICE and Border Patrol raids in Minnesota to Anne Frank being captured and sent to a concentration camp by Nazis, one day after Minnesota Governor Tim Walz did exactly that. Anne Frank was targeted and murdered solely because she was Jewish, the museum posted on X. Leaders making false equivalencies to her experience for political purposes is never acceptable. It continued, despite tensions in Minneapolis, exploiting the Holocaust is deeply offensive, especially as anti-Semitism surges. Its post follows Walz referencing Frank while urging President Donald Trump to withdraw federal immigration agents from his state after the shooting death of Alex Priddy. Walz said kids who are either in the country illegally or are the children of illegal immigrants are terrified of going to school because of Trump's raids, and that history will judge his administration harshly for it. Allow our children to go back to school. We have got children in Minnesota hiding in their houses, afraid to go outside, Walz said. Many of us grew up reading the story of Anne Frank. Somebody's going to write that children's story about Minnesota. So, listen, you can critique the Trump administration and the overreach without comparing it to Anne Frank, and I do think that is hysterical and obviously insensitive to the actual legacy of the Holocaust. There are no concentration camps, nobody is being put in gas chambers, and removing people who are illegally in the country or without documents is not the same thing as them going door to door to kill Anne Frank and her family. I'm sorry, it's just not. And I do agree that that is ridiculous. And it's the kind of thing that just escalates. We really need everybody, whether it's Tim Walz or Donald Trump or Stephen Miller, to all stop the rhetorical escalation and making more and more severe allegations and accusations against each other and actually try, just for a moment, to bring the temperature down. So there's fewer deaths, there's less violence, fewer clashes, because otherwise things are going to keep getting worse. And I'm really concerned that that's the most likely outcome here. But you guys will have to let me know what you think about all of that in the comments below.